Welcome back, everybody, to the DC New 52 review. I want to thank you personally very much for tuning into another episode. I am your host, as always, Paulie DC, and let's get right into this thing. Today's episode will feature Animal Man Volume 1. It was titled The Hunt, and the first 6 issues were released between November 2011 to April of 2012, and they were written by Jeff Lemire with art by Travel Foreman. Issue number 1 has the first pages of an autobiography featuring our main character, Bernhardt Buddy Baker, explaining how he's a very part-time superhero these days, and he's now more of an indie actor slash stuntman and activist. We then meet his wife, Ellen, older son, Cliff, who's rocking a sweet mullet, one that I think even Martin Riggs would approve of, and younger daughter, Maxine, who is seen asking for a real puppy in the house, but Buddy explains that he can't have one single animal around him for too long because he'll form some kind of bond to it that becomes too close, which sounds super weird. So yeah, let's just stick to Mr. Woofer's the stuffed animal. Buddy then hears about a local hostage situation at a nearby hospital, and after a bit of debate with Ellen, goes to check it out. He meets up with a cop buddy of his named Detective Crenshaw, who tells him about the situation with a guy holding kids hostage. So as Animal Man, he heads inside and uses his powers, which he calls a few things like the life web and morphogenetic field, to handle the problem. However, after all that is said and done, Animal Man begins to bleed from the eyes in front of Detective Crenshaw, which warrants a doctor's exam since he's in a hospital, but the guy who looks at him says he's perfectly healthy. Once Buddy heads home and he gets to bed, he begins to have a very disturbing dream about Maxine and a trio of creatures that call themselves the Hunters 3. And if this isn't a definite indicator as to this series leaning toward the horror side of things, I'm not exactly sure what is. Buddy awakens from his dreams to find his family in major panic as Maxine has seemed to develop some kind of animal-related powers and has brought in all the dead and buried neighborhood pets back to life. Now, like I said a second ago, I wasn't aware that this series was going to be heavily into the horror aspects the first time I read it, and wow, this definitely surprised me. I thought Animal Man was going to be some kind of family man hero, rescuing kids and being an animal rights activist, but instead we get some straight nightmare material. Issue number 2 picks up right where number 1 left off, as Buddy has another case of bloody eyes, but this time it's accompanied by an intricate design on his body which Maxine calls the Red Place. After welcoming the new pets into their home, Maxine tells her dad that the markings on him is actually a map to something called the Old Tree, and the two of them must get to it before, quote-unquote, they do. And if you were a new reader of this series, this is when you can kind of start to tell that a big storyline was about to unfold. Maxine is shown to have another power, and it's definitely animal-related, as she morphs an irate neighbor's hand into a bird talon, and then reverses what she did after he pleads for it. Once all that is done, and after much heavy debate, Buddy and Maxine decide to head out and seek the Old Tree. Later on that morning, at the San Diego Zoo, a trio of hippopotamuses begin to show signs that something is about to burst out of them in front of 3 of the zookeepers. Oh boy. This occurrence ends up being the return of 3 agents of something called the Rot, and they are known as the Hunters 3, who were seen in Buddy's dream in the previous issue, and they proceed to eat the three zookeepers and steal their skin. Did I mention a ho boy yet? Just making sure. Anyway, with help from the animal kingdom, Buddy and Maxine seem to find the old tree, which they enter inside of, and this is showcased with art that just gets more and more bizarre. Speaking of the art, issue number 3 starts with an image you'll never be able to unsee, and if you were a fan of Animal Man coming into this title, you sure get to see something new here. Buddy and Maxine make their way through the old tree, aka Red Place, and eventually meet the totem animals, former avatars of the Red, or Lifeweb. A brief scene is seen of the Hunters 3 together, and one of them being sent off to dispatch Ellen due to her producing Maxine and them having fear that she might produce another like her. We then jump back right to Maxine and Buddy, getting a lot of information dumped on them, like how the supposed aliens that gave Animal Man his powers in his actual origin story from before the New 52 were actually agents of the Red, and he is only a pawn that was meant to be a guardian to the real and newest avatar of the Red, Maxine. And because she is now active, there is a huge war coming that she must be a part of. Things then kind of jump between the two of the Hunters 3 entering the old tree, while the other one goes after Ellen and Cliff in terrified manner. Buddy is demanding that Maxine be left out of anything dangerous, but the totem animals mention that the Red and the Green must band together to get ready for the war that is coming. Not much more can be said, however, as two of the Hunters 3 continue their invasion into the old tree, which seriously surprises the totem animals inside. Meanwhile, Ellen and Cliff are hardly able to escape the other one, and Animal Man tries to take on the other two, exhausting his powers as much as he can, but even after a very brave effort, he seems to be no match for them. Ellen and Cliff are then seen continuing their getaway, and when things seem to look safe, they stop to contact Detective Crenshaw on Buddy's request, only for him to be attacked by the hunter who was after the Bakers, and like the zookeepers, has his skin stolen. And this was almost surprising to see sometimes. Like, damn, a character actually bit the dust? Like, for good? Okay. Issue number 4 begins with Ellen and Cliff, who have met up with the body snatch Detective Crenshaw, and they're heading to Grandmother Mary's. All the while, Animal Man has landed on an ape-like appearance that resembles that of Mr. Hyde from the Alan Moore and Kevin O'Neill's League of Extraordinary Gentlemen comics, in my opinion, but he still can't do much against two of the Hunters 3. So, after some coaxing from the totem animals, Maxine shows her increasing powers and rids the two hunters from the old tree. Animal Man has been gravely wounded, however, so Maxine is able to show another ability of hers, which is to heal living flesh, and she ends up saving her dad from certain death. We then get another big information dump as the totem animals explain what the Hunters 3 are, having been former avatars of the Red and eventually became totem animals like themselves in what they call the Parliament of Limbs, but they were then corrupted by the Rot, which I guess kind of explains where they came from. However, it doesn't really explain the horrific hippo happenings that were seen earlier. I mean, why those animals? And why did they burst out of them like that? And if they could do that, why didn't they just eat all the animals and all the people in the zoo? I don't know, and I don't care. The totem animals then go on again about Maxine being the new avatar of the Red, and Buddy must protect her at all times and cost. And one of the totem animals, who used to be a cat named Socks, even decides to leave the Parliament of Limbs, which shocks and angers his compatriots due to that being his last time ever going to be allowed there. Back over at Grandma Mary's, the Hunter 3 member is seen having trouble staying inside of Detective Crenshaw's skin outside, while inside it's shown how much Ellen truly loves Buddy and how much Mary doesn't, which is definitely a short but kind of important conversation. Ellen and Buddy's relationship throughout this series is a cornerstone. Finally, the Hunter 3 member has to break his disguise and decides to finish feeding on Detective Crenshaw and then snatches Cliff, which alerts Ellen that something is wrong. Just as that's happening, Buddy, Maxine, and Socks are seen arriving at the Baker homestead, and they realize quickly that something is very wrong. Issue number 5 opens with Ellen protecting Cliff from the one Hunter 3 member, and then it cuts to Buddy, Socks, and Maxine racing to find them, with Buddy having the opposite of a save the cat moment. And just as they arrive, they see Ellen in the midst of being severely violated, but Cliff is able to save her this time. Animal Man tries to jump in and help, but instead pretty much just takes over as the one who's getting facially violated, and Ellen and Mary and Cliff decide to leave his ass behind. Nice. And then, just when you thought that things couldn't get any more gross, this issue goes an extra mile when Buddy is shown nightmares from the rot, where Maxine is a corrupted creature, killing and eating him. Nice. Like any loving father then would do, Buddy pleads for Maxine to be left alone and for him to take her place, but unbeknownst to him, she tries to help out all by herself by using a new power she has, which is to control animal life, and she ends up sicking a batch of them, from ants and bears to birds and bats, on the Hunter 3 member, to the point of them all ingesting it. However, this is actually something that benefited the freaky thing, as due to that happening, it is then stated that it's inside the red, much to Maxine's distress and the rest of the Baker family's dismay, as they take off in an RV thanks to now being chased by the woodland creatures from hell. And as they're hardly able to get away, Socks then mentions it is time for them to seek help from the Swamp Thing. Issue number 6 is pretty much what we can call a filler issue. It had to kind of wait for Alec Holland to become the Swamp Thing, because that didn't happen until issue number 7 in that series, and we were only here on issue number 6, so we kind of get an opening story of the movie that Buddy Baker's been making, a superhero movie called Tights, which is kind of an art imitating life situation. Buddy plays a washed up superhero named Chaz Grant, who used to go by Red Thunder, and he's lost his son, his wife, and he tries to get back in the game only to get severely beaten, leading up to him admitting that all he wants to do is be a superhero. And this is kind of something that Buddy mentions periodically in his narration about him really loving to be a superhero as well. That's basically it, as the last few pages are of Cliff shown to be the one watching the clips of his dad's movie, and then Socks again mentioning that they must find Alec Holland, who is the Swamp Thing, because the rot is very close behind them. Alright. Right away, let me say Jeff Lemire is a great horror writer, and here he produced another awesome series. Intense, well-paced, and a little bit scary, all tied together, leading into one of the top crossovers in the New 52. Even though this version of Animal Man was taken in a very macabre direction, and that was beyond different, thanks to Lemire, it was able to go 5 volumes long, instead of what easily could have been a 10 to 12 issue sort of deal. Total throw off too when you start reading in the beginning. It seems like this will be a family oriented hero living in suburban California, but yikes. As I said before, things get dark, disgusting, and pretty disturbing mighty fast. and that is in no small part to Travel Foreman's art, which, if I'm being 100% totally no BS truthful, I'm not the biggest fan of. It kind of reminds me of those scary stories to tell in the dark books, which absolutely scared the crap out of me as a kid. And staying on point with that mention, the Hunters 3, which are original characters here and designed by Travel Foreman and Jeff Lemire together, were definitely truly good antagonists for a trio of monsters. Even their dialogue from thing to thing is different and unique. There's always one thing I've always wondered when it comes to the superheroes that have animal powers too. How do they really work? Because, as I said in a previous video about Vixen, if they can actually harness anything in the animal kingdom, then it's just limitless as to what they could do. Animal Man could maybe use the Greenland shark's genes to age slower, the proportionate strength of certain bugs, which is known to be some of the strongest on the earth. Maybe he could make himself poisonous like the frogs of South and Central America to maybe protect himself from, I don't know, a bite from a certain monster in a past issue. The reason I say this stuff is because all the beautiful animals on this earth have just really piqued my interest since I was young. From the Seek and Find books to watching guys like Steve Irwin, there's just something so fascinating about all of them that live here with us. But before this turns into some kind of World Wildlife Foundation ad, I will end this here, and I want to say thank you if you've made it this far, and to please like, share, and subscribe. Please follow me on all my social media platforms, and to tune in next time for Batgirl Volume 1.